The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
23 minutes now to 8 the time. Warren Ingram, a certified financial planner at Galileo Capital. Tonight, the importance of living and breathing debt-free. Warren, good evening.
Good evening, Stephen. I love that phrase. Yeah, I think if you are debt-free, you can certainly breathe much easier than those that are kind of weighted by, crushing debt.
And the main reason for that is that you have financial freedom. The money that whatever income you have is yours, not someone else's, yours. Your phone doesn't even get any SMSs at the beginning of the month anymore.
Yeah, I like to think of it as when you've got a huge amount of debt, that salary that you've worked so hard for, at the start of the month, you send that money to the bank. You're actually working for the bank and until that debt is repaid. You're not really working for yourself and building out your financial freedom. You're kind of paying down a debt, and especially if that debt is incurred, on things like credit cards and personal loans and overdrafts, because most of that debt people are incurring to buy stuff, stuff that has no value. So, if you've got a big mortgage, that's a different story because, the likelihood is that hopefully your house is appreciating in value over time. And when you pay it off, it's an asset in your balance sheet. But when you've got massive personal loans, credit cards, etc., all you're doing is making the shareholders of the banks wealthy, and working for them essentially, not working for yourself. So that financial freedom point is critical. If you want to take control of your life, you can't find excuses. I know it's hard. I know cost of living is high, and I know interest rates are high, and the economy is not doing well, and people are losing their jobs. All of those are a reality. Unfortunately, you can't get to age 65 with those reasons and say, well, now I'm just going to sit back and give up. You can't give up. You've got to take control and get to financial freedom.
It's the old story, isn't it? We buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like with money we don't have.
100% true. And you always think, one decision is if you buy something that whether it's an outfit or, pair of shoes or something, just decide that, in a year's time, if I've still owned this thing, will it still be impressive? Will it still make me feel good? Will it still, make people think that I'm on top and I'm in charge? If not, and it's expensive, maybe move on and, buy something that's reasonable. The most impressive thing you can do to most of us is have a healthy bank balance. That's really impressive.
The other thing, of course, is that it reduces your stress. And I find that so many people the discord, the unhappiness that financial problems cause in marriages, for example, is such an important symptom of this. If you are debt-free, you really will feel better about life.
Spot on, Stephen. I think if you look at the kind of common causes of divorce around the world, not just in South Africa, top three, always debt will be one of those, or financial stress, let's say, not just debt. So you've got to find a way to kind of get that debt under control and to create some kind of gap in your financial position, because, it's 50% of marriages end in divorce. Give yourself a fighting chance to get to the other side of this, but by at least controlling the finances. And, I'm not going to talk about the other one, Stephen, which is, a pressure of being parents, but we'll do that another time.
You also talk about an improved credit score. And if you've got an improved credit score and you do need to borrow money, you get a much better deal.
Exactly. So people, they are learning. It's interesting. 5 years ago, this wasn't really a question we faced a lot. People saying, I'd like to improve my credit score. So I think there is greater awareness and sort of education happening around credit scores. But I think what's not being discussed is, why are you so fixated on your credit score? Is it to get credit so that you can buy more useless, valueless stuff? Or is it so that you can, buy that car that you desperately need to go to work, or to buy the house that you want to, raise your family in? So again, it's important to know why you're doing these things. A lower credit score, a good credit score means that you're certainly right. You get a better interest rate from the bank, and they're probably more willing to lend money to you on more favorable terms. If you've got a terrible credit score, the likelihood is you don't get money, or you get it from a loan shark, and good luck trying to get out of that problem.
The other issue around control. So in other words, you can make decisions that you want to make rather than decisions you have to make. That's surely very, very important. The idea that you are actually in a position now where you can decide, I'm going to do this because I can, not because I have to.
I always think of my little goddaughters when they were young, Stephen, and they used to say, I'm the boss of me. And I feel, this is one of those situations. If you want to be the boss of you and you want to control the direction of your life and you want to control how you spend, it means that you can't be paying away 50 or 60 or 70% of your after tax salary into debt, because actually your debt is controlling your life. Your debt is the thing that's telling you what to do every day. And it limits so many choices. You can't make long-term positive choices about building capital for yourself and your family, and potentially moving from, a small compromised house to a slightly bigger place where you get a bit of room to breathe, and, the family can kind of grow along with you. So I think it's important there to understand that, control is a little bit different from financial freedom. Financial freedom is the goal, but early days, if you're running with a lot less debt than average, then you get to exert control of your life. And I think it's, a key point. We want to be the boss of us. So be very conscious of this point when you start looking at debt again.
One of the themes of the conversations that you have, Warren, is about the magic of compound interest. And often, compound interest works against you in terms of the interest you pay on debt. This is obviously a way in which the magic works for you.
One of the great privileges in my working life was meeting the founder, one of the founders of RMB and First Rand, Laurie Dippenaar. And I said to him, if you had to give somebody one tip, I love financial education, what would you say? And he said, those that understand compound interest will earn it, and those that don't understand it will pay it. And coming from the guy who owned a rather big bank, I thought, well, that's really good advice. So I think that's the point here. When you've got a credit card and it's costing you 25% interest, understand that the stock market's generating 12%. So the credit card is compounding against you at twice the rate that you can grow your assets. And why I talk about the stock market is it's usually your best chance of capital growth. So if you've got debt compounding against you at 25% and you start today at 100, the likelihood is in 3 years' time you're sitting on 200, and 3 years later it's 400. That's terrifying. So you have to make sure that you take control of this debt and get it down so that you start to earn compound growth, and rather than paying it the whole time and making the shareholders of all the banks wealthy.
It's one thing to get out of debt, and sometimes people do that, but it's only temporary. Why is it so hard to stay out of debt? And part of that, I suppose, is maybe about not necessarily having a spending plan or being tempted by something. I think temptation's a real problem. How useful is a spending plan in a situation like this?
It is a spending plan and an emergency fund are easily the two most valuable tools that we all have in our toolkit that we can kind of deploy to take control of our lives. And I think a spending plan is important, because I'm not the kind of, Grinch who steals Christmas. I'm not saying don't have fun and don't spend some money on the things that you really like. What I am saying is have a spending plan. So say to yourself, at the start of the month, when the money arrives in my bank account, immediately a portion of that money is going to go straight into paying off the debt. If you're sitting with a massive debt problem, take a portion of that salary, hopefully that you do it via debit order, the very day after it's arrived in your bank account. So you've got no time to spend it, and create a plan where you set aside extra money every single month to pay off your debt. Then once you've done that, once you've paid off the first debt, give yourself a bit of a reward. Then say, okay, I'm going to go away for a nice weekend, or I'm going to buy that, that ridiculous, whatever it is, pair of shoes or outfit or whatever, as long as it's not setting you back into debt, whatever makes you feel happy, then give yourself a reward, and then start again and say, okay, I can have another reward once I pay down the next debt. So this isn't about living like a hermit on a hill with no fun, no kind of enjoyment on life. That's not sustainable. It's just the same as we can't go on a diet where we only eat broccoli and drink water all day. We'll either go mad or get depressed and start eating crisps all day long.
The emergency fund, you're talking about something, because this is often, a great cause of debt. Something happens, someone, you have a small car accident, or you break an arm or something. Someone in your family needs help. I think that's a big one. Someone in your family needs help. What kind of fund would you be looking at? How big should it be? How much money should you have in there?
I think the first point just to make, Stephen, is that it is an emergency fund. And I'm emphasizing that because a lot of people will look at their emergency fund towards the end of the year and say, gee, that's a nice amount of money to use to pay for our holiday at the end of the year. It's becoming a lifestyle emergency, and that's not the reality. So a proper emergency fund if you've got a fairly stable job, you want to kind of allocate about 3 months worth of your expenses. So if you spend 10,000 Rand a month, then allocate 30,000 Rand into an emergency fund. It doesn't need to be in an investment. It, in fact, shouldn't be in an investment. It should be in a kind of an interest-bearing account that's linked to your banking profile. So when you need money urgently, you simply go to your banking profile, you transfer the money to where it needs to go, and you funded the emergency. If you've got a career where you're not in a predictable, stable income, let's say you're a contractor or something, a lot of people are in that position nowadays with the gig economy. If that's the case, then extend your emergency fund to 6 months worth of expenses. And important point here is please don't build up any other savings until you've got the emergency fund. Don't worry about your retirement fund. Don't worry about your tax-free savings. If you don't have an emergency fund, what happens is Murphy will teach you a lesson. It happens so regularly, and you really don't want to be going into kind of credit card debt problem when you've got an emergency. I think COVID taught us all that. We couldn't, a lot of us couldn't have foreseen that the world would just stop. Many people lost their jobs, their companies just closed down. And those that had emergency funds, they didn't necessarily get through the other side of this in a great position, but gee, they got through a much better position than those that had no resources and no emergency funds.
Sure, yeah. Lifestyle inflation, in a way, people, the key thing is, we spoke about this on the show the other day, is around subscriptions, for example. You don't even know you have them half the time. And you think, well, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get this service, I'm going to use that, I'm going to start to get used to this, I'm going to use Uber Comfort rather than Uber Go. Then the algorithm gives you that the next time. It's very easy to fall into that trap, isn't it?
It is. And we feel that we should be rewarded. We feel, we've worked hard, we're getting promoted, we're getting increases. Why should we continue to live the lifestyle that we used to live as students or, first year workers? And I think the point here is if your salary goes up by 10%, let's say, that doesn't mean that you then need to continue spending at the way you did before the 10% increase. What I'm suggesting is save 5 or 6% of that increase immediately, and then go and allow yourself a little bit of freedom, a bit more extra money. But I've had the privilege over nearly 30 years of doing this job. I'm sounding like an old man now, but the people that have achieved financial freedom most consistently as salaried earners, the one thing they've all got in common is this exact point, Stephen. They allow their income and their savings to accelerate far faster than they allow their cost of living to accelerate. And getting that right is absolutely key.
It is the most important thing, isn't it? Well, we've got a question from Keegan. Keegan asked the question, I've got young children. I'm worried about taking care of them if my wife and I both pass on. How do I ensure their assets are safe and will be used to take care of them? I don't want the funds to be misused. It's a great question. I think it's a great fear that many people have. Warren will have an answer for Keegan in just a moment. 10 minutes late.
The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
And Warren, that question we had from Keegan, he's got young children, he's worried about taking care of them if he and his wife both pass on. How does he ensure that their assets are safe and will be properly used? He doesn't want them to be misused. And isn't this one of the great questions that I think one of the great fears that all parents really have?
It's such a terrifying situation. If you go into a hall of parents, adult parents, and you ask them to just put up their hands, those that have a will, in most instances, when I do this, about half the room put up their hands. So just turn it on its head. I never ask the other way around, who doesn't have a will. But that means half of the parents that I've ever come across, and I would guess that they would be financially a bit more engaged than most, don't have a will. And if you want to protect your kids, in the event of your death, the one thing you absolutely need is a will. And so I think the starting point is make sure you get a will. And what you want to put in that will is you want to ensure that firstly you've identified who are going to be the people that are going to look after your children. So it's not just the financial decision, it's actually the day-to-day practicality. Who's going to look after the kids? A lot of people would just say, if they're youngish parents, they would just say, well, it'll be our parents. And I think that's really not a good idea. You don't want to get to the situation where you've got very young teenagers being raised by their grandparents. If you talk about a generation gap, that's a recipe for disaster. There's a reason why grandparents, have a role, and it's not as parents again. So you want to specify that. You want to talk to everybody. And then secondly, you want to make sure that the assets that you've got go to your children, but you really don't want your kids at, let's stay in the example, 12 or 13 years old, inheriting quite a few million rand of a life policy or something. So what you can do in a will is you can say that I would like to have a trust that gets formed immediately on my death. So if my wife and I die, the very next day, a trust will be formed. All of the assets will go into that trust, and the trustees then take responsibility for looking after our kids financially, so to pay for their living costs and their education and their housing, etc., until such time as they are old enough. And you can even specify that in your will to say, this will trust should end, when the children are 25 or whatever the ages that you would like. I would say, knowing myself, 35 would probably have been a very responsible age. I'm not sure 25 was a good one, but maybe 25 is a reasonable one. So I think that's a key point. And then if you're young and healthy as a parent, make sure you've got enough life cover so that the guardians of your children are in a financial position to afford, for example, a bigger car. They might have children of their own. They might need a bigger house. So just make sure that you've chatted to those people and made sure that everyone financially is going to be okay if both of you die unexpectedly.
I mean, there's a lot of thought that you have to do, and yet some of it is sort of obvious, really, and quite structured, I suppose. A will is a will. You talk about debt, and you suggest that not all debt is bad debt. There is good debt and bad debt. I mean, I think it's very tempting to just think all debt is bad and evil, and therefore to be avoided completely.
There was a very good cowboy movie, very old cowboy movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So what's good debt? Good debt is when you buy an investment that's going to grow in value over time. And typically, when we're talking about growing in value, we're saying growing faster than inflation. For most of us, that will be our home. And, not always the case that homes grow faster than inflation. But if you take a 20-year view, there's a good chance that, that's good debt. So taking an affordable bond on a house, or an investment property that you can pay the mortgage and all the rates and all those things, that could be considered good debt. Neutral debt, there is only one thing I've ever come across that I consider neutral debt, and that's buying a very affordable car. We tend to overspend on cars in South Africa, but if we need a car to get around so we can work and earn a living, then I would consider that neutral debt. So bad debt is pretty much everything else, Stephen. It's the debt you incur on credit cards, personal loans, overdrafts, micro loans, whatever, loan shark money, because all of that stuff is incredibly expensive. It grows so fast against you, and the likelihood is you're not using it to create wealth, you're using it to fund lifestyle. So you need to get rid of bad debt as quickly as possible. It's okay to have good debt for a longer period of time. If you take a decision to pay off your home over 15 years, that I could live with. But gee, you want to get rid of the bad debt as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, I hear you what you mean. And the other thing is, this sounds almost old-fashioned. It's, what happened when you first got pocket money. You've got to save for something. You don't buy it, you don't pay for it afterwards, you pay for it before.
The phrase, fly now, pay later. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. People talking about the end of year holiday. And so what happens is that they plan the holiday, they just don't plan how they're going to pay for it. And what they do is they use their credit cards, they borrow money, and then they pay for it the next year. No wonder people call January. So I think, things like that, which you want to do, and they are going to be rather expensive and not normal expenses for you, plan for them. Set aside a little bit of money every single month at the start of the year for your end of year holiday, and do the same with any other major purchases. And do the kind of common sense thing. If you don't have the cash to pay for it, don't borrow money. You can't afford it. Just wait until you've got the money.
I suppose in a way managing money is also a habit, isn't it? You get used to good habits and bad habits. And if you've had some bad debt habits, you can have good debt habits. You can kind of know when you're about to do something a bit silly.
Yeah. And I think that people are kind of, we kind of deceive ourselves, if that's the right word. So we'll keep our credit card with us, even though we know if we go to the mall, we might end up swiping a few more times than we're supposed to. And nowadays with your phone being your kind of credit card as well, it gets even worse. So you've got to find ways to stop yourself spending on the silly things that are just impulse buys, and find ways to block the money that spending the money that you don't need. Rather give it to somebody else to hold for you if you must, but obviously somebody you trust, please. But make sure that you create habits to look after your bad habits.
That's what grandparents are for. And staying informed and motivated. I mean, there are people who obviously look at this, but there are communities around saving. There are communities around personal finance.
We have a superpower in South Africa. It's called stokvels. And I wish we could roll this out to the whole country where we kind of get together and we commit around it, around the table, even if we don't pile our money together, which could be dangerous, but we commit to each other to say, I'm going to save X amount every month. And then you get held to account. Once a month, you sit down together and say, I did it or I didn't. And you get support or motivation from the group. We should use social pressure or peer pressure in our favor, not always just against us.
Warren Ingram, thanks very much indeed. Co-founder at Galileo Capital, a certified financial planner there with personal finance on The Money Show tonight.